Welcome to the Bloody Aussie Battler podcast with your host, Mike Holt.
Are you interested in podcasts that uncover the truth? Tune into Widdershins podcast. Straight from science fiction, we uncover the technologies being developed right under our noses. We bring to you the world's leading scientists, engineers, and experts to discover just how far away these things really are from becoming our reality. www.widdershinspodcast.com.
Well, g'day, and I'm very happy to welcome back Kevin Annett to the chat room here. How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing really well, Mike. Good to talk to you again.
That's good. You're looking well. You've been out in the sun a bit, have you?
I have, yeah. I've been traveling around a lot, working with people locally. So,
just before we started, we were talking about progress on both sides of the Pacific Ocean here. And you mentioned that people in Canada who are going to try and lead people towards common law are getting targeted by the police. Well, guess what? It's happening here too. But tell us about what's going on over there and what the remedy is.
well, on the West Coast, there's a special, amazing response to what we're doing, because here we have direct impact from the Chinese invasion, right? Not only the grabbing of the whole economy and the government by the Chinese, but the attacks on people. I mean, there's out and out Chinese troop presence in British Columbia now. It shouldn't be called British Columbia anymore. It should be called Chinese Columbia, because that's where a lot of the liquid natural gases the Chinese are hungering for. And there's a whole climate of repression. I wouldn't be surprised if there was out and out civil war on the whole west coast of North America between China and patriots here.
Whoa.
And we've been talking to groups in America that are making direct appeals to the Army and the police to saying, when that happens, I mean, there's already a civil war breaking out in America, we believe funded very much by Chinese money. But when it happens, people have to be willing to just draw the line and say, no more retreat, no surrender to this. It's time to resist actively. And we're preparing people for that in the common law assemblies. We're not just, like, we have 43 of these now across Canada. And there's several dozen down the west coast of the US. And we're saying to people, it's not a matter of just teaching people things. We have to take back power in our communities to defend ourselves for what's coming. And to give an example, one of the people in central Vancouver Island, there's an assembly forum. There were so many people showing up, we had to hold it out in the field. We had over 75 people. And they all took a pledge to the Republic. They all signed the charter. And now, I know in Australia, republic may not be a good word, but in Canada, it's a very good word, because it means against, this whole dictatorship that's been going on for the last 150 years here.
Yeah, the New World Order.
Right, the New World Order. And so anyway, in one of these groups in central Vancouver Island, one of the leaders of the assembly, she's a doctor, and she doesn't wear masks in her office. Well, sure enough, the day after she announced she was being the chair of the assembly, they show up at her door and say she could face prison terms if she doesn't mask her patients. And she said, there's no medical reason or justification for masking, and I have to see their face, to deal with them. I'm a physician. But anyway, so it shows you how the targeting happens. And our response is to go to these people immediately and hand them a notice of liability, saying we're going to summon them and they could face arrest, putting it back, turning the tables on them, and thinking offensively, not defensively, right? So we're trying to get people into that fighting mode rather than how do we protect ourselves mentality, right?
Yeah, if you could send that to me, that would be really good. We've got the same problem here. Victoria is virtually in lockdown now and has been for a couple of weeks. And the Premier down there is just, we call him Chairman Andrews, because he's an out and out communist and he's a dictator. And he's just shut down the whole state because a few people got sick. Woo. I mean, they don't talk about all the deaths from cancer, all the deaths from road accidents, and all the other deaths that go on. oh, we've got to have this big pandemic. But it's going on in Victoria and people are getting beaten up there. One of our members got his car impounded the other day. It's also going on in Tasmania, and another bloke down there got beaten up by the police in Launceston. And yesterday they closed, or no, today they closed the border between New South Wales and Queensland. So there's massive traffic jams and people are really, really getting angry. So we need to have more tools now, as you say, to get more offensive, because up until now we've been very quiet, but things are ramping up, they're ramping it up. It's time for us to get active. So any help you can provide there, especially with documents and advice, that would be really, really helpful. So tell us again.
Well, you know, partly, you know, where it really begins, Mike, is an attitude. You know, as human beings, we have this self-preservation thing that runs deep. And so when we're faced with a threat, especially when it's so global, we immediately think in terms of how do I evade, how do I hide, how do I protect myself? But that's kind of an animal response. We need a higher response saying, you know, there's a great responsibility on our shoulders to basically save the human race, because that's what's at stake here, our humanity. Yeah. And we know what the long-term agenda is for microchipping, you know, and exterminating the human personality. It's our lives are on the line. The lives of our future children depend on how much we fight right now. So encouraging people very much to think in terms of what we need to do to put them on the defensive. And they're only as powerful as their own frontline people, the cops, the health workers, all those people. And we have to appeal to their hearts and minds, but also to their fear. What do they fear most is losing their job, facing a repercussion for what they're doing. And once you start, and we found this with the campaign against these genocidal churches, once you drive a wedge between them, they all start buckling. We can do that very easily with this stuff because they're criminally liable for what they're doing. And, you know, we have for example, I'll give you we have a notice of liability, and it's called offer of conditional release. So it says to the police, we hand them this thing and we say, you're involved in a criminal action against us. You can face arrest and repercussion. But we're willing to release you from that liability if you stop imposing these dictatorial restrictions on us and you start actively defending the people and their constitutional rights. If you do that, you're on side with us and you can actually help the people. And here's a form you sign whereby you're declaring to do that. So instead of thinking defensively, we counter by saying, here's a contractual offer. Now the ball's in your court. It's like playing tennis. You knock the ball back to them. You don't try to evade being hit by the ball. You knock the ball back at them with that kind of form. And, you know, it tends to work. It certainly gets them thinking, which is what we want, right? Mm.
Yeah, that's the big problem here, though, because the cops here, and of course we didn't have that tool until just now, thank you for that, but we will get that out to the people. But the problem here is the cops believe that they're doing right, but they're also being ordered to get very, very belligerent with us. You know, they're smashing people's car windows to get them out of the car when they refuse to open the door.
Police have smashed in a car window to arrest Eve Black, a coronavirus skeptic who posted a video of herself breaching a Melbourne checkpoint. Here's a reminder of what she did.
I don't need to answer your questions. No. Have I committed a crime? Pardon? Have I committed a crime? Have I committed a crime? Thank you.
They're arresting people arbitrarily. They're beating people up. And it's only just started, but we can see it's going to escalate. So we need, as you say, we need to get more proactive and take the fight back to them, but in a good way, as you're saying, you know, give them this way out. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of these cops will take it.
We give them one chance. We say, you have this one opportunity to get on the right side. And then look, frankly, man, you're fair game. And people understand that. People understand force. And it can, you know, it can be moral force. It can be physical force. We have the majority of people on our side and sympathy among the police and others, but they can't come forward because of the system they're in. They can't come forward and say that. You know, you got to meet these cops off duty. You got to meet them in their homes, in the communities, get them on board. We've already started doing that, and it works. But you can't confront them as a group on their terrain. It's like Sun Tzu says in The Art of War, you don't fight on the terrain of the enemy. You create your own terrain, bring them into that, and then you've got the power, right?
Tomorrow, by the time you see this video up online, it will have happened. We're holding an open, a private meeting in a public hall, actually, community hall, to show people what common law is and how it works. And then we're going to do a mock trial, because the idea now is to show people how we have the power and what we can do with that power to bring these criminals to justice. And, you know, rather than going for the low-level policemen and counsellors and people like that, we need to go for the top, for the people right at the top who are directing all of this. So I've got people now who are planning to take the state premiers and the Prime Minister and the government, the federal government, into a common law court. Whether they turn up or not is irrelevant, isn't it?
That's right. My friend, when you do that, you're in a win-win situation, as we discovered in Europe with the common law court of justice there, because if they don't respond, they are in a position of admitting guilt by their inaction. It's called a pro confesso admission of guilt under common law. So especially if you're a prominent person, you want to defend your reputation. If you don't defend your good name and reputation, it means you're not contesting what's being said about you. And they're found guilty. And that guilty verdict and sentence can then be acted on by other courts by issuing arrest warrants, liens on their property, that kind of thing, right? If they do respond, then they've legitimated your court and they say, yeah, you do have authority. So you see, you're in a win-win. But you have to have the boldness to declare that publicly and put it right in the face. And that's what they're afraid of, because they know they're in the wrong. It's like all these COVID restrictions. The time and again, the government, at least in Canada, says these are not enforceable because they know they're illegal, they're bogus, and they can't really insist that people do it. They can only recommend, you know, and then if you're not a good little cattle lining up in the line, then they whack you on the head. But the point is, they rely on people's compliance because it's illegal what they're doing, and they've acknowledged it by saying it's not enforceable. They've also acknowledged it by not having mandatory quarantine, because if it was a huge illness, they'd say you got to stay in your house, but they don't. They recommend it. So how can it be serious if they're just recommending it? You know, it doesn't make any sense on any level, as we all know, right?
No, that's right. And they're letting people fly between states here, and even bringing hundreds of people in every day from overseas. And yet they're telling us we need to stay home because otherwise we'll spread this so-called disease. What disease is it? Now, one question we can ask when confronted by these cops, etc., can you show me the federal act of parliament signed on by the Governor General that mandates all these so-called rules? And of course they can't. They don't have it.
They don't exist.
Once they realise that you've got them over the barrel, there's not much they can do.
Except hit you on the head.
Well, yes,
you know,
that's right. Yeah. Lucky I got a hard
That's
head.
what they're doing. Right. Good. And they can just raise the club for so long without pissing off a lot of people. And in fact, we have to thank them. I want to thank, you know, the whole COVID police state, because globally it's activated a huge resistance movement that we couldn't have done by ourselves, right? You know, it's the old saying that your enemy, your big adversary is your best ally, because they waken people up far more than we can on a much bigger scale by their actions, right?
Right. And that ebook that I'm writing about common law right now, and it's mostly taken from your nice little handbook, in which you state that once a verdict is handed down by a common law court, every person in the community has a duty, not just a right, but a duty to enact that verdict. And that means if the verdict is to arrest these people and incarcerate them in jail, every man and woman in the community has a duty to go out and enforce that. Now, if you look at the history of the United States, when they were fighting against the British for their independence, what did they do? They didn't actually start the war with guns. They went to the courthouses and barricaded the judges in. And then they marched them out and marched them through a throng of people, making these people recant their sins against the community, tarred and feathered them and stuck them on ships to go back to England. Well, we can do the same thing.
Exactly.
We have that right.
I was reading a book about that. The Green Mountain Boys, they were kind of like the local defense militia in Vermont. And long before the shots were fired at Lexington and Concord against the British, the Green Mountain Boys would do that. They would go in and shut down Crown Courts, burn all the mortgage records, whereby, you know, the landowners were like ripping off all the farmers in Vermont, and then tar and feather them and put them on the ship, exactly like you said. And that sparked, then they went on, they grabbed Fort Ticonderoga without any orders. They just seized the fort from the British. And they kind of pissed off the others in America, because wait a minute, they're jumping the gun. But that's the point. You've got to encourage people to take those initiatives all the time. That's how real change happens, right?
That's right. Yes, you can't just sit behind your keyboard and say, oh, how terrible it is, wringing your hands.
No.
You've got to get out there and you've got to confront the enemy, but you do it smart. And
that's how you learn about them. It's how you learn about where their weaknesses are by, you know, you can't win every battle, but by every battle is won because you learn something from it. Even if you lose it, you've learned what to do, what not to do. And it's a continual learning process. And that's the advantage of the assemblies. We come back all the time and share those lessons with each other. We're not just doing it on our own, right?
Yeah, and actually that's what we'll be doing tomorrow at the assembly. I will be encouraging people to get together and unite and work together so that we can start doing all of these things. Now, the good thing is that we've got a...
it helps them.
Sorry?
Well, you go finish. I just had a point on that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've got the website now. It's commonlawcourtaus.org. And we're putting up information on there. We've got all this good information, all the documents that are needed, again, from your booklet. And tomorrow I will be getting them to the people who are there to sign the, what did you call it? The Assembly of 100?
The charter for the assembly.
Right.
Yeah, we need 12 people to sign the initial charter setting up the assembly. Yeah, out of which is established courts and sheriffs and all that. You send me a link to that website. We want to post it on our site, which is republicofcanada.ca.
Okay, and we'll put a link back to yours too.
I should mention, you know, you talked about our common law training manual book. I got a call from some people in Sweden, and they're all excited. They want to set up a common law assembly there, right? But they say they have no common law tradition in Sweden. And I said, you don't need one. It's the law of nature.
Yeah.
It's born in all of us. And they were just so happy. You could see a light going on over their head, and the idea that they could do something now, right? So that book is making its rounds all over the world. Yeah, he held one up, and I said, "Oh, it's all the way up in Sweden. That's great." You know.
Exactly. Actually, I make that point in the ebook that I'm writing, that every country has a tradition of common law. It's the law of the land. And even the Aboriginal people here, for instance, they have always had their Aboriginal law. It was pretty basic, you know, so sometimes the punishment would be a spear through the thigh, or if you really transgressed badly, they would sing the bone at you, point the bone at you, which would sing you to death. They would literally, once they knew that they had to have the bone pointed at them, these people would go off and die. That's pretty powerful psychological stuff. But you know, the of that tradition everywhere has. The Brits, way back before the Romans ever arrived, had common law. And in fact, it's funny you mentioned the Swedes, because they've had common law for centuries, well, millennia. So it's just that they've forgotten, and that's the problem. A lot of us have forgotten.
That's the bit. It's about recovering memory that's in, you know, that genetic memory of who we are. And you know, another term for common law is customary law. It's the customs of a people that they create themselves over centuries to protect themselves, right? And their children and their liberties. And it's common sense, like they say all the time in America. Common law is just common sense. Right?
Exactly. Do you have any other advice for us, please, mate?
Well, you know, one thing I urge people to set up right away is not just security in the form of sheriffs, but a network of people who are willing to respond in a moment's notice, like the American Minutemen in the Revolution, right? We're able to respond in a minute. We call them urgent response teams of 10 or 15 people. Let's say you or somebody else is getting targeted. You make a call in your network and boom, you got 10 people there with cameras recording it. You know, the cops are less willing to do something when there's numbers and when you're filming it. So never do anything alone. Never go out by yourself. Always go in groups and have people able to respond.
This morning, funnily enough, I was thinking that this morning, that the way things are going now, we need to go out in groups informed groups.
Yep.
Yeah, good thinking.
That's how you reach people. Yep. Yep. And it impresses people. You know, if you're one person, they write you off as some kook. If you're a whole group, you say, look, we're a lawful body, an assembly formed under the law. The longer the shutdown happens, the more it helps us in our whole movement, Mike, because where's the government? Where are the courts? Obviously, we have to create it in our communities, right? It helps us, right?
Well, all the courts are shut down now, apparently, because they're all in quarantine or you know, voluntary isolation. I mean, how stupid is this? What sort of
I think
people are doing this?
I think it's not just stupid; it's a plan. And I frankly don't think they're going to reopen. I think we're in a new kind of society now. It's a corporatocracy, you know, it's run by big moneyed interests and bureaucrats in their pay, and everyone's expected to go along. Don't forget, if China is as much a threat to Australia as it is to North America, right?
Well, we know that.
Putting their clenches down in your direction. The Chinese have no tradition of common law. It's Confucianism. And in the Confucian, whether it's Mao or the emperors or whoever, the idea is you got one knowledgeable ruler and he tells everybody what to do, and you comply or you're dead. There isn't any of the humanitarian common law, human rights tradition in the West in China. So this is a battle to the death. You know, when that system takes over, this is going to look like kids play what's going on now. There will be severe, you know, there'll be a Tiananmen Square every day, right?
Well, we can see it already, and a lot of Australians are waking up. We've got literally thousands, perhaps millions of Chinese here now. I don't know exactly how many, but a lot of them came down as students, they stayed, or they sent their kids down here and bought property. They own a large swath of Australia, including the largest body of fresh water in Australia up in the northwest. It's bigger, the body of water up there is bigger than in Sydney Harbour. So, you know, we have a severe problem here, and most people have got their heads in the sand still. But, you know, the worse these lockdowns get, the more draconian the fines, the worse it's going to get for them. Now, a few weeks ago, the Premier of Queensland set the police onto hotels in the outback, and they went on, you know, sweeping missions right around the outback, checking on hotels to see that people were keeping their distance and, you know, abiding by the COVID rules. And they meted out fines of $7,000 and $8,000 each, and hotels can't afford that. So I got in touch with these hotels to ask them if they would be willing to combine and convene a common law court. But they said, oh no, we've gone to the Queensland Hotels Association, they're working for us. Well, I don't think the Queensland Hotels Association is working for them because it's a government body. And, you know, or it's governed by the government. So I'm just waiting now for these guys to wake up and realise, and then we will convene a common law court for them. And we will go after the police commissioner, the premier, the police who carried out the raids, anybody who's involved. So,
well, and don't forget, they're no doubt acting in the direct behest of the Chinese government with money, even if they're not aware of it. 10 years ago, the head of Canadian Security Intelligence Service, it's like Canada's CIA, right? His name is Richard Fadden. And he said, in a public statement 10 years ago, he said, the Chinese government has been systematically infiltrating all levels of government on the west coast of Canada, the British Columbia government, especially the resource sector, mining, forestry. And he was forced to step down the next month. You know, they forced him out because he called a spade a spade. Well, we need that hard dirt to show that these people are directly in the pay of Beijing. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right?
It is. And unfortunately down here, a lot of people still haven't woken up to that, but I think they're starting to get the picture, you know, but don't worry too much, because even in China now, a lot of the people over there are putting up messages saying that the devil Communist Party. So the Chinese people are not the Communist Party. It's only, what, 98 million Chinese are in the Communist Party, and most of them there because they have to. But a lot of them are handing in their memberships. And I don't know if you saw it, but there was a report the other day that the Beijing residents were fighting the police over these lockdowns. And you don't hear about that in China. So people are waking up even in China. They don't like the communism. So, and we have communism here in Australia. We have a communist government, federal and state. I don't care what you call it. It's socialist communism.
Well, it's weird how the all over the world, you know, you got two tendencies: people who either want totalitarian rule, no matter what it's called, or people governing themselves. And there's a line drawn in the sand. You got to choose. Where do you stand now? There's no more middle ground on this stuff, right?
No.
And that's why there's a huge support for us out there. It's not spoken, but it'll come forward. You know, people wait to see what happens, and then they jump ship. And that includes the cops and the soldiers too, right?
Yeah. They've got the soldiers out in Victoria now, patrolling the streets and going door to door to test people. You know, that is unheard of in Australia. I mean, I lived in Thailand for 30 years. I lived through 5 coups and I lived through military juntas. And I tell you what, we're starting to see exactly the same thing here. This is not good.
Well, you know, all the seeds we're planting now, they're going to bloom, and a lot of people are going to join us. You know, once experience and a knock on the head wakes them up. That's what we rely on, right?
Yeah. All right, mate. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I'm so glad we finally connected.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
You stay away from the bears.
We'll do it more. We'll keep each other informed and keep backing each other up. That's what we got to do.
Fantastic. All right, mate. Well, by the way, I don't know if I told you, but we've also made contact with New Zealand, and we're supporting each other there too. We're all starting to connect up, and that's what we need to support each other.
Absolutely, especially in the English-speaking world, because that's where common law comes from. That's our strength.
Exactly. All right,
Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
See you again soon.
Yep. Okay, you will.
Bye now.
See you later.
I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. The needle tears a hole, the old familiar sting, trying to kill it all away. But I remember everything. What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the end. You could have it all.
you have chosen the Red Pill, then there is only one place to host your website. Enlightened hosting, no censorship. Domains, hosting, secure. Build your website and get online fast. www.redpillhosting.com.
If you're enjoying the Bloody Aussie Battler podcast, please consider donating to help keep us going. You can donate just once or make it a monthly donation. Any amount is welcome. To donate, go to our website at www.thebloodyausiebattler.com and click on Donate.